artists and labels. And basically, the intention is to try and delve into the forthcoming transformations set to redefine this landscape for the music sector, particularly for artists and labels. I will not take too much time to speak because I think our panelists who are here with me today have much more to say than I do. Let me introduce you to, wait, I copied this. Bas Grasmayer, who works with communities at Colors, and I liked his LinkedIn about first sentence says, strategies in the business of future models for culture and media. Sounds complicated, but super interesting. Will Page is an economist, author, podcaster, and DJ. He's the former chief economist at Spotify and PRS. Dario Dastrata works at Impala. Sean Preston from Ninja Tune and Anne Haffmans from Domino Records. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm just gonna start straight into questions to try to understand these changes and these transformations in the music industry landscape. Let me start with the impacts of the streaming era and its limitations. Will, how would you say streaming has shaped the modern music economy?
Obviously in huge ways, but there's a simple way I can summarize it. I would say that what we've seen is the music industry is making more money. No one can deny that. It is booming out of its skin. Catalog valuations, revenues that will be reported by yearbooks around the world, but it's got way more mouths to feed. So the money side's simple. We're all seeing more money flow back into business. The supply side is the interesting part, which is we have more artists, we have more songwriters, we have more songs to serve with that money, way more. So in the UK, to put some numbers around it, the population of artists and songwriters in our country has trebled since Spotify launched in 2009. And that's a great news story, that's positive. But you can see the arithmetic makes things tricky. So in our country, we had a 3-year-long inquiry debating about, is streaming fair? Are we seeing enough? Should songwriters see more and artists see less? Should artists see more and record labels see less? So it was all sort of very mixed arguments. But I think that arch of the story is, yes, the business is making more money, but it has way more mouths to feed. And that's a positive problem to solve.
I forgot to say that I have some questions addressed at some of you, but if any of you want to jump in and add any personal experiences present with your artists, especially you that work for record labels and stuff, feel free, please, to jump in. Another trend that we are seeing is a return to vinyl, and maybe even especially amongst young generations. And I know, Sean, you are particularly working with this at Ninja Tune, so I wanted to ask, how do you think the shift on vinyl sales has influenced your strategy?
So Ninja Tune is sort of an outlier in terms of vinyl, I would say, in that we have we've always sold vinyl in large amounts, largely because of the sort of music that we make. I think even when we had kind of like down spells and the amount of demand out there for vinyl in the market, let's say 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were still making vinyl, and not everyone was. But obviously, like everyone else, like all other labels, we've seen a massive upturn in the last 10, 15 years, and then during COVID, it was insane, as I'm sure most people have heard. It was very difficult to even buy vinyl for double the price that you would normally pay for it. So it's meant that, number one, it's become obviously a key part of our physical strategy again. But it's evolved in other ways as well that I think is quite interesting and probably overlooked a lot of the time, in that a big part of what indie labels do now and the way that we function is obviously through our publishing and sync. So the vinyl can, or even any physical product really, it becomes somewhat of a shopfront item for what we do. It's a way to sort of sell our brand or our identity. They're promotional tools in the same way that, you know, we used to maybe poster or paper the town with stickers, and that was like the sort of, I guess, the DIY way of doing it in the 90s. And I think now our lampposts or billboards are actually shop fronts, and, you know, going into rough trade or you know, whatever the sort of Virgin megastores of Europe are now, that you go in there and there's your record, and it's sort of a way of, people aren't necessarily going to buy it. Obviously, a lot of people still do sort of window shopping style record shopping, and it's sort of there as a sort of presence that it kind of feeds into our digital streams as well. And it's also true of when people buy our records, in that, and again, this happens across, you know, labels, and I think across, and then we're talking about majors as well here, is that people, and maybe specifically with majors, in fact, that people who are buying vinyl. Okay, people who, yeah, there we go. I'm a lot louder now, am I not? There we go. Okay, brilliant. So I was just merely saying that people, there is the way people interact with vinyl and the way that we sell vinyl has changed significantly, I think, in the last 5 to 10 years. That it's more of a sort of, obviously the sales count and they really matter to us as a business and other record labels, but it's also somewhat of a promotional tool. Very often people are buying vinyl, taking it home, probably not even listening to it, maybe using the download code, but actually they're just going to listen to it on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. You know, maybe they might listen to it once. So it's the way that people interact with vinyl and how we're selling it and what we're using it for has changed significantly.
You go.
So just 2 very quick points to bolt onto that. Well, firstly, a lot of my student debt was accumulated by buying Ninja Tune vinyl records. But firstly, a trivial point and a technical point. The trivial point is all the data that I've seen in the UK points to 60% of our vinyl buyers don't own a record player, which feeds into something you mentioned, which you can laugh at, but then you have to say, well, what are they buying? You can access 100 million songs for £10 a month, so why are you giving up £25 to buy 10 and not listen to them? Is it merchandise, becomes the question. Is it a form of identity or a way of getting closer to the artist that you love? It's very hard for a fan to give a band that level of money through streaming, but they can when they buy a record. So I think that's one interesting area to explore. The technical side is on the royalties. Now in streaming, you monetize consumption. So if I have an album of 10 songs, 1's killer, 9 are filler, then that album can be #1 in the charts, but if you wrote 9 out of those 10 songs in the album, you get nothing. And this happened with Gautier, you know, very famous artist, for having just 1 single hit as well. When you go to vinyl, the royalties are allocated equally. So it's very interesting to think back to the greatest selling vinyl record of all time was Saturday Night Fever, the famous John Travolta soundtrack. And we all know which song made that album famous. I think track 21 was Ralph McDonald, Calypso Strut. Nobody and their dog has listened to that song, yet it got the same royalty as Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. So there's a trivial aspect. People are buying this not to listen to, but they are buying, so what's the purpose? There's a technical aspect, which is this affects the value of music catalogs as vinyl grows as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to second you on, because we are also at Domino, we have never stopped producing vinyl, you know, and it's like, it's in our DNA and the DNA of the label and its artists to also have their albums available on vinyl. And but we are finding that there's a significant shift in Germany. I work for Domino in Germany, I have to say, to attract sales for vinyl by a young clientele, you know, a clientele that, as you mentioned, might not even possess a record player, you know. That's not what kids are buying vinyl for, to actually play it, you know. Most of them keep being sealed in the shelves and just being collected, you know. And I just wanted to add from my recent experience that not only vinyl has a resurgence, but also the music cassette. We've just lately had a few. I just counted some numbers for the latest Arctic Monkeys album, which sold a substantial amount of music cassettes. And then also on our artist Wet Leg, lots and lots of cassettes being sold. And then I only we had an autograph session with Wet Leg in a store in Berlin, and then because I always wondered who is buying cassettes, you know, but it was the girls that wanted to have an autograph, and they didn't want to spend the 30 euros on the vinyl, plus they wanted to keep the item in their pocket or in their, and so they bought, for $11.99, they bought the cassette, you know, and had it autographed. So I thought like, this is maybe it. But also I wanted to just add that in Germany the vinyl pricing has gone up significantly because we are making nicer vinyl with more added to it, with nicer printing, and I'm sure that you can say some more about it. The particular reason in Germany is that we are calculating the charts not by numbers, but by the value of the merchandise. So since 27, we have value-based charts, so the development of the vinyl market goes with a much nicer set of vinyls that are being sold for a higher price in order to fetch a higher chart position.
Just wanted to add, coming from the region that we are now actually in, Balkans, and heading an association that's covering former Yugoslavia territories, now independent states, talking about vinyls make me think a few things. What is the impact, not on the audience, not on all the trends that we were now just heard of, but also that in the beginning of 2000, especially 2010, as globally, so we saw in the region decline of music stores. It was just each day the music stores were vanishing. The CD was going down, we didn't have another product, and everything was going digital. Unfortunately, we had the disadvantage of not having streaming services like the rest of the world until 2.5 years, especially talking about former Yugoslavia territories. But now with the rise of vinyl, we see actually each month birth of another vinyl shop in the region. So to my account, we are now talking about maybe 30 or 50 shops in the region. What happened? Not only that some artists that are not primarily streaming artists, that are still album artists, that are focused on directly to audience, who play a lot of shows, who go to the different places, not just in the region, but all throughout Europe and globally, have found another way of communicating their art. This is something that almost vanished. I don't know if COVID helped us. Maybe it did, because we started to maybe have more time to listen to the music as some generations before did, not just to pick some tracks. So that's one thing. Second, as I mentioned, economy, new number of businesses rising, that is also good. And as Sean mentioned, people are coming to these shops not just to buy, but to hang out, to learn something, to meet somebody. It's cool to be there. But remember how it all started. It was cool to go to the music shop, because you meet some people, maybe they listen the same music in you, maybe they have the same ideas, and that's how things get started. On the other hand, also looking at the communication with the rest of the music industry, especially in the indie world, talking about Impala connections, and we are now starting to renew our connections with big indie labels from Western Europe. So now we have, after long years, direct Beggars Banquet distribution through whole former Yugoslavia that's selling a good amount of physical projects, but not only that, also promoting. Because why? We know that major companies can promote globally. Okay, big indie companies can also. But on the local level, there is a difference, because majors don't have time, don't have teams, they don't care about local promotion in the small territories. Indie labels do. They have bands coming to a smaller audience, more dedicated audience. So it's all influencing a lot, not just to promote indie labels in the region, but also to help smaller or medium-sized businesses, labels, to grow their business. and to connect their artists and get some knowledge from their peers in the West. That's why this conference is now coming, as we discussed today, more and more conferences coming to the Balkans region, which is really good. Each day we have now, each month we have some event. This is something that 5 or 6 years ago wasn't so. So this is a good benefit. And on the streaming side, yes, it is something that is bringing some money for, I'm talking about these parts again, to the industry. But we are, as you know, less developed market. We still don't have direct contacts with the streaming services. We are working on that with Impala and other partners here. So we are not still on the same level as you guys. So that should be kept in mind. Also, there is a problem of diversity language, but we can address that later. I just want to add one thing, because talking about vinyls and albums and tracks, now we have proposed or already in place new streaming revenue share models that are not going on the hand to the artists who are doing albums. They are just going to the artists who are doing single tracks, the most popular artists. And if you have an artist who is an album artist, who maybe has, as Will said, as used to be 1 or 2 singles from the album, it's not gonna come back to him with a lot of money from the streaming services. This is something that also needs to be attended, and within Impala we are doing a lot of work on that. Some of you probably heard of our 10-point streaming plan. We are continuously renewing it, and especially it is important in the parts that are not on the same level as more developed Western Europe and the rest of the world parts.
Just conscious we're in a rabbit hole of vinyl here, but just a couple of quick additional points. I don't know for Domino in Germany what the queue time is to get vinyl pressed up for an Arctic Monkeys release. Yeah. Yeah, so a great example of demand exceeding supply is when queue time is 6 to 9 months. It is coming down, but my life, whilst the book is in full flow just now, is wrapped up in NDAs. One project I got to work on I can't talk about is Travis Scott's release of this album. But I want to put a shout out to the company Pressing Business, which we talk about Central Eastern Europe, based in Poland. The capacity they're bringing into the market now is bringing queue times down, allowing one-stop shops to deal with things like Brexit, getting into the UK market, Mexico for Latin American markets there. And it's incredible to see the demand that you're getting through direct-to-fan models like Travis Scott, direct-to-fan models like Taylor Swift. We can talk about Taylor Swift. The versions, how many versions of the same album
ridiculous,
are her fans buying?
And none of the rest of the industry could press anything during the time when Taylor Swift was producing. It was really terrible.
But add it up. I give you £120 a year to access music on streaming, but I could easily be giving Taylor £200 a year to buy one record of 14 songs.
I think specifically with Taylor Swift, and that's the sort of, you know, the zenith of formats on vinyl, obviously, but we do it across, you know, indie labels as well. The same happens at Domino, that there'll be maybe 5 or 6 different versions of the same vinyl. The yellow version, the rough trade splatter vinyl version. It's because obviously we understand that the bigger fans, they kind of maybe want to have a few different versions, or it's a way for us to go back to charting, that we are able to sell more records in week 1, which is, for us, is the sort of key week of charting, because to compete in the charts with major labels is difficult, but we can compete for 1 week if we put all our eggs in the week 1 basket. So it's interesting how we, you know, all those different formats, including tape cassette, will add up to our chart count. I also wanted to mention what, as you sort of said, with capacity and how difficult, when we talk about capacity, sorry, I'm talking about literally factories and what they're able to produce on vinyl, obviously very antiquated manufacturing process. So, you know, where you can make 10,000 CDs in an hour, you make, 50 to 100 in an hour on vinyl, right? So it's a really difficult process, hasn't really changed in the 100 years, not especially. So the demand for a long period of time, as some of you will probably know, was quite high, and it meant that a lot of labels were not able to get the amount of vinyl they wanted to get. So what we have seen, which is really interesting across Europe, and we're talking about UK and mainland Europe is new sort of smaller plants opening up. I think perhaps too many of them have opened up overall, but I think that's what happens when there's demand out there. People think, well, it's a bit of a gold rush, let's try and do this. But I visited quite a few smaller plants, and the best ones, the ones that I think will survive, have an understanding of what their market's going to be, and I think they'll sort of see the likes of Ninja Tune and Domino and Warp or whatever else beggars as their sort of larger clients, but they're not going to solely work with them. They're going to concentrate on sort of the amount of artists that are out there and locally. I visited a really good plant in Lithuania, in Vilnius. They just opened in April, and they're really savvy with how they're doing it, and that 50% of their business they want to keep it as local, because they know that it's been a struggle for artists locally, not just Lithuania, but towards Estonia as well, and into Poland a little bit, but Poland, no, where else is near there? Yes, Poland. That those artists have access to getting vinyl made, and because it's important for them. And obviously, especially with new artists, it's really important to be able to get your product out there quite soon. Going back to what we were talking about, how vinyl is now merchandise, let's think of it as the T-shirt for your band. I mean, a lot of the time I used to go to whatever punk gigs when I was a kid, and I bought a T-shirt and probably wasn't going to wear the T-shirt, but it was just a way of showing my support. It was a way of having some sort of ownership, which is, again, where the vinyl thing comes in. So it's really important for those new artists, those new record labels, to be able to get vinyl out there. And I think that's another way how vinyl is going to change and how it's going to support new artists and new labels.
I think it's super interesting how we have spent like 20 minutes of a panel about the future of the music landscape, speaking about vinyl and cassettes. But it is indeed. I wanted to also touch on the other side of like the music sector, like in terms of live performance and direct-to-fan engagements. I wanted to ask how you think artists and labels are leveraging the power of live events, and for instance, in the case of Domino, and if you could tell us how you have adapted to this dynamic.
Well, just in general, at Domino, we very much believe in the power of live, and we fund a lot of initial touring of our new artists by spending money on sending them on tour in multiple territories. And I keep, on debut albums, I keep telling managers, you know, for Germany, it's very important not only to come once and play in one town, but like maybe play 2 or 3 or 4 towns, you know, and maybe then come back within the album cycle even, you know, because that's the way to gain your audience, to also counteract the local competition that there is, you know, because we are seeing a fierce local competition with German bands rivaling the international bands. Nobody is waiting for Franz Ferdinand to come on tour again when we have Leoniden or Kraftklub or whatever local German band that can be touring there. So I'm very, very conscious that we live in a fierce market environment, but live is the best-selling argument for any music. Only the artist can sell the music perfectly, you know. And I'm also very adamant always to tell my artists to bring enough vinyl on tour, because I mean they sell. I've seen it. I had this massive argument with Goldfrapp's management back in the days when I was still working for Mute, and I went to the show in Berlin, a sold-out show in a rather big venue, and at the merch stand there was only T-shirts, and I said, like, why didn't you bring any vinyl or even CDs? You know, he said, the guy said, because I assumed when people had bought a ticket, they had already bought the album. I said, that's exactly the point. You could have sold him the album twice, you know, because in the emotional aftermath of a good live show, people want to get something on the merch stand, you know. So we have at Domino, it's like a massive pillar of our marketing campaigns for our albums in the short and mid and longer term, to have them go out and tour. It's important.
I think can I make a question first? Because you were saying about the fierce competition between German bands, and I think this is something that we are seeing in many different places. How do you think the festival landscape has affected this? The fact that people is no longer waiting for Franz Ferdinand because maybe they'll go to Primavera Sound and see it there with along 200 other artists. Do you think that has something to do?
Yes, I'm not a booking expert, but I can only observe it from like being in the industry, and I see that this is a big problem for international repertoire in general in touring Europe, because the festivals are getting more localized, you know, in their lineups, and I mean, apart from that, there'll always be the hottest superstar from international that will always fetch whatever they want to get in revenue from a festival, you know. But the mid-range of artists, you know, that were like the strongholds of every other festival season, you know, they find it difficult, partly also because the costs have exploded to put a band on tour, you know. Especially for UK bands that I'm dealing with a lot with the Brexit, you know, all the additional costs for like now having carnet de passage and visas being issued, and like travel, like steering times for bus drivers, and all of this additional costs, you know, it's crippling. It's crippling, and I think it has a profound effect. And then also, I always want to mention the summer festival season of 21, the directly after COVID, when it wasn't possible for international bands to have had planned a tour in time for the festival season. This is in Germany. All those headliner slots were filled with German bands because they were readily available, you know. So that's my first.
If I may add on the festivals, I think if we are talking about jeopardizing the local artists with the festivals, we see that problem for years now. You see, the festivals always take international stars to be their headliners, which is of course normal, but to get a decent slot with local band on huge festival is practically impossible. So they just take these bands when they can't get, you know, maybe somebody else, and they just put them on really low rates and then don't give them good conditions. That's a really huge problem because of course it's not helping the local scene, it's not helping to create more audience for the local bands, although there are local bands that could sell a lot of tickets, they could do arenas, they could do stadiums, etc. But when it comes to the festivals, most of the promoters think, okay, we'll get a huge number of international stars, pay them millions, then get billions back, and because that attracts sponsors, etc., etc. So that's another problem. And the second problem is what we see in as I heard, happened in Poland, that big companies like Live Nation coming to buy good local festivals, then shutting them down, just to get rid of the competition. So it's also another big problem on the market, if we are talking about live business and that. On the other hand, the benefit, especially now I'm talking about, again about region, the big festivals like Exit in Novi Sad are doing really great job to promote the territory, to promote the country, Serbia as a country, or other festivals like Outlook and Dimensions happening in Croatia, or Ultra happening in Split. That is a global event. It means a lot. It is, we saw this year on Ultra, this was really good, and it was really well communicated. We had a local stage with local DJs and artists coming to out, giving them a chance to present themselves to global audience. So that's the way that I think all the festivals should have in mind. Maybe not just a commercial, but let's do something sustainable for the local artists, for the local scene.
Will, yeah.
Yeah, just to build beautifully on these two previous points here. If you look at live music in Britain, and I'm going to make this more relatable in a second, working with our collecting society, Performing Rights Society, PRS, I was able to model the entire live music industry in Britain. And I've done this for several years, but last year it broke 2 billion. So British concert goers spent over £2 billion going to concerts, up from 1.7 billion prior to the pandemic. Incredible bounce back story. Beautiful, what's not to complain about? As I mentioned with recorded music, more money, but way more mouths to feed. There's a catch in that half of our box office now is stadiums and festivals. Used to be 1/5, now it's a half. So that's a positive problem to solve. It's great we're spending all this money, but we're spending it on the upper end of the market. And I was exploring why, and I was speaking to industry colleagues, why is it that perhaps I say to you, do you want to go to Camden on a wet Wednesday night in November and spend £10 on the door to see this up-and-coming band? You're like, nah. Do you want to go and see Blur at Wembley for £180 and £65 on T-shirts? Where do I sign? Well, I mean, that's consumers. Consumers are right to choose. That's their choice. But why? And I heard this beautiful argument presented to me. It's kind of off record, but just the argument was, what we used to do when we went to grassroots venues to see up-and-coming bands was we previewed. Maybe I'm seeing the next Franz Ferdinand. Maybe I'm seeing the next Coldplay. And that makes me excited. And I'll go on a wet Wednesday to Camden to see that up-and-coming band to preview. Now, we just preview on our phones. And that's why nobody goes to see grassroots anymore, but everybody wants to go and see the Arctic Monkeys sell out the Emirates Stadium twice, The Weeknd sell out the London Stadium twice, WizKid selling out White Hart Lane Stadium once. It's just incredible. We had 1 million people go to stadiums and festivals in London in 1 week. It's booming at the top end, but it's been strangled at the bottom end.
Yeah, it used to be impossible to think of an artist going from nothing to a stadium, like without passing through different levels of venues, right? And now it is an option. Yeah. Now it is an option. Yeah, that's super interesting as well.
Harry Styles never did an arena, he just went straight into stadiums.
Could I just say as well that you're right in that it's a positive problem to solve. I think, and I do think whoever said that has a massive point. We are previewing things on our phones or on the internet or whatever. I think it's going to have to be up to labels and new artists to understand that and to still make that work on the live scene. That the preview on the phone should be, this is good, now I definitely have to go to Camden on a cold, wet Wednesday night and see them, which is something I would do. And I probably am going to go and see 1 in 4 that I would previously, but I will still see that 4th one if I'm like, I have to see this act live. So I think if we just, labels and bands and artists need to think more creatively about how they are showcasing
100%,
on people's phones.
100%. There's a lot of knocking heads to be done. Case, you do not need a microphone. You've got the loudest voice in Europe.
No, what I want to add is, and really for the future, I'm talking to Cesar of Live Nation in Spain and to the people of Eurosonic. Sorry, my name is Kees van Weijen. Recently, I'm really on a mission now, and that is that I urge all the festivals to create a new stage for grassroots acts, and that is something which I'm really forceful as Impala board member for fighting now, and we're starting discussions because we need new platforms for those grassroots artists, even if they play max half an hour on a festival, but it should be in a separate stage in the off hours, or at least that people can discover new acts as well at these festivals.
And then to quickly underline Casey's point, just with a rather depressing statistic, but do a pessimistic Scottish economist, a great way to understand what Case is saying is to look at the average age of festival headliners over time. In the 90s, we had bands in Britain in their 20s headlining Glastonbury. The average age last year at Glastonbury was 58. So I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm just saying where are the headliners of tomorrow coming from to fill those big stages in years to come?
And that's the age gap, and then we're not even talking about the male-female ratio, which is even worse.
As a policy expert, because that's what we do at Sound Diplomacy, I think we tend to forget, like the sector tends to forget one of the players, which is governments. Governments, actually, like in my case, the city of Barcelona, Primavera Sound, is providing Primavera Sound with a lot of support maybe not in money, but it's providing them with this huge venue, with extra transportation, with extra security, with this, that, and that. And they're not receiving anything in exchange, which I've always thought that one of the things should be this support, like this supporting grassroots bands, this supporting up-and-coming Catalan bands from Barcelona through this huge festival, which is, it's global exposure. And I think the sector should be a bit more demanding to their governments to ask for policies for that. I'm diverging a bit, but that's my topic as well. So. I wanted to move to, I was going to say more to the future, but it's the present, and talk about alternative or innovative ways to monetize music for artists and labels, and to ask you, Bas, as an expert about insights on how like new technologies are revolutionizing or are the present of artists' revenues and rights management.
Oh boy, giant topic. Oh, hey everyone. I was trying to see if I could like coast through this without like speaking. So like one of the points that was brought up, I think, by Will when it came to vinyl, I think is really interesting, which is the question, like, what are people buying? And I think when we think about, like, especially like digital landscape, I can't really say much about rights management, but if we think about digital landscape and kind of unlocking new types of business models on top of what already exists, like, so we have this streaming layer, which is great. It creates like this kind of basic economic layer for music business, for artists, especially if you have like kind of larger catalogs. Now what do we build on, and also data and connections between users and artists and things like that. Now what do we build on top of that? Because I think if you're probably any artist in many rooms in conferences, there's unlikely to be an artist who can make like a living off of streaming, or is relatively rare. So back to the question that you asked of like, what are people buying? I think this is the question that you need to figure out, that you can go figure out as label, as an artist, whatever, trying to build a business. So with vinyl, there's going to be different answers, but like I think one of the things that people are buying is they're buying into kind of an increased connection, escalating kind of the relation that they have with an artist, experience like more intimacy towards them. Buy into like a group identity and things like that. So I think it's, I mean, and there we can go in many directions. Personally, I think YouTube is a really interesting kind of streaming player to watch because they bring, I think they're like, people talk a lot about MySpace, and the cool thing about, or like older people in music, because the cool thing about MySpace is it brought like social music together, and that's kind of missing from many of the music streaming services that we're using, but it's there in YouTube. You have like potential like fan clubs, you have comment sections, you have like live streams, commenting in there, you can like upsell in that, and those types of features also exist in things like Patreon and maybe even Bandcamp, although it's kind of hard to make that work in Bandcamp because of kind of how the app and the product experience is structured. But I think this is a really important thing to focus on, especially because I don't know the number today, but like a few years ago, 60,000 tracks per day were being added to Spotify. Now it's like over 100, I don't know, maybe 120,000. And it's just like in 2 years, we've doubled. And that's only going to speed up because now we have like kind of AI tools, so it's going to be easier and easier to express yourself musically, which I think is awesome. More people are going to be making even more stuff. So how are you going to stand out? So you really have to build like a relationship and a community with your audience and participate in that. And I think that's where you can start building business models. For example, for YouTube, but also for new technologies like kind of well, I was going to go towards like NFTs, but I don't want to broach a whole new topic quite yet. because I'm sure, yeah, exactly.
And also to hear more about colors as well, which really impressed me. In terms of, you mentioned Patreon and YouTube in the same sentence. I think for this audience, that's a development I would pay very close attention to, which is I call platforms that sit on top of platforms. So on Twitch, you can use Streamlabs. Spotify looks to be partnering with Patreon. And of all the work that I've done since freelancing around the publication of the book, one that got published was twitchrockonomics.com, public, go check it out, explaining the live economics of live streaming for the first time ever during the heart of the pandemic where bands had to go to live streaming to make money. Long story short, there was one artist that we did a case study around called Travis Nelly, married couple living in Austin, Texas, locked down, couldn't leave their house, live streaming on Twitch. And I was looking at all the revenue streams they were generating on top of Twitch. I said, hold on, you've got Kickstarter here and Patreon. Usually it's one or the other. How can you have two? And they said it's simple. We use Kickstarter to finance the creation of new compositions because it's a one-shot game. And we use Patreon to finance the covers project because it's a recurring payment model. And to see that type of entrepreneurship from the creators, bottom up, not top down, just so illuminating. I mean, they were making more money than any data scientist at Spotify by just using their common sense.
No one wants to add anything, okay. I was telling Bas before that I'm quite ignorant, this new AI and well, new or maybe not so new. I always find fascinating whenever someone speaks to me about this and how revenue can be diversified through those. I wanted to ask about. So I think now we have kind of laid some of the assets and the opportunities that are there, and I wanted to ask what are the main challenges that artists and labels are facing today, and how also these assets that we have been discussing can be used to overcome these challenges. I don't know, Dario, if you want to especially from the region.
That could be a separate subject, and we could talk all day.
I know.
I mean, there are a lot of challenges. It's ever-changing world. You see everything is something else. Let's start with legislation. We have the directive from European Union that should have been brought to the copyright acts within whole European territory. We still didn't see it finished in some of them. We see false copyright acts coming with some really doubtful law acts, and that's not going to help either artists or the labels. But the biggest problem that I have with it is it's too late. With that, the technology has went not one step, 10 steps ahead of it, and we should address the moments that have happened or are happening. That's going to happen in the future. That should be the role of those who are making legislations, especially if we are talking about that kind of big institution like it's European Union. Then the challenges that we have as a labels now. You probably all heard 100 times this sentence, especially in the past 20 years. Okay, who need labels now? We can do everything ourselves. And okay, you are my label, but you don't have enough. You don't have the same things. You don't have that much to do for me as you did when you had most of the physical part. It's totally the opposite. Now the whole world is staged. Now we have our whole catalogs out all the time. Now we have to fight to compete with the rest of the world. Now we have each day to learn something new, how to promote better our artists. Of course, you can do a lot of things yourself. You can choose that way, but on some level, you're gonna need some help. You could go directly through some distributors, but they are not dedicated to your project. They are not the ones who are gonna help you to come to wherever both of you think that you should come, or just try it. I mean, they won't care if you, as we heard, brought enough vinyls to your concert to sell. Labels will think about, because that's what they live for. So the second problem that we have is, of course, education. We have constantly lots and lots new labels, new artists coming to the market that need to learn to be able to compete with the rest and to be able to express their creativity. If they don't know the rules of the game, if we as a music industry don't have time or resources to share this knowledge, to educate them, and constantly we have to start from the beginning because there's always somebody who doesn't know the basics. This is something that, as not just labels but associations, we need to have time for, and we need to, especially on the territories that are not on the same level as more developed territories. So these are some of the challenges. I spoke earlier about these new streaming models coming. It's for the smaller markets, it's going to be a problem. For the niche musicians, for the labels who are doing niche music, it's, you know, world music, jazz, etc. This is not good. So, but they have to deal with it. There are lots of challenges. Of course, there are lots of opportunities. We are seeing in these markets, especially Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia, even more developed like Turkey, we see huge rise of income coming from the digital, meaning there is an audience here that should even be stronger, but we have to have partners in streaming services, not just someone who is coming here to take some kind of, you know, profit and not to do anything else. We need to have cooperation, and it is because if we are talking about big markets like, I don't know, UK, Germany, etc., I think they, in the streaming, they probably reached their peak. I don't think it can be much bigger unless you have to pay more for the service. But here, you can really grow. It can show, and if these markets grow, then everybody is better. So there are lots of opportunities, and the biggest opportunity, especially if we are talking about indie labels and the indie music scene, is huge amount of talent coming constantly from these labels. We see it daily. We see it even here in Sofia. Go to the concerts tonight, or if you have been last night. There are a lot of new artists emerging, coming. This is a huge, you know, always. This is advantage of indie labels. We have time, and we are here, and we are present to develop new artists. Of course, some of them then went to the majors and they become big, but that's the game. What we can do. But the talent is always coming from our side of business. That is undoubtable true. We see it in the rise of market share of indie labels globally. It's constantly rising. Each year, it's. I'm very much looking forward to see what numbers we will see for 2023. So that's something that we can work on, and that is our advantage. And of course, it's up to us if we're going to use it or not.
Bas?
I think it's important that you can like interrupt us or me if I'm going on for too long. So keep the mic. I think, I mean, I'm kind of looking at the perspective of artists like 25 and younger or so, and I think I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, but I think one problem is that they are walking into kind of like infrastructures, a landscape that's complete. It's like a, I don't know, boomer landscape or like boomer legacy landscape. I don't mean this as an accusation, but like it's a lot of the music business, including the whole music streaming industry, and I'm not, this is not pointing fingers because I worked in streaming myself for 5 years, is based on 20th century paradigms of recorded music industry, which was novel then, but also when we're just talking about festivals, that's also something from like kind of a structure, an institution in a way from that past century. And now we have like these old headliners, for example. Meanwhile, like kind of younger people are growing up in a world that is not working the same as kind of like mass production, mass distribution, mass consumption, mass media. They're not communicating through kind of the old school channels and things like that anymore. instead, we live in a landscape that is more like kind of networked media. For example, just take internet memes, for example. Things like travel gets adjusted and gets spread through networks. That's very different from kind of the business actually that recording business does, because there you make like a finished thing and then you send it out for like all the channels, streaming services, etc. So I'm kind of worried. I mean, this is a problem and an opportunity at the same time. I'm kind of worried for younger people that I think a lot of the success models that they see, and they don't really address the kind of media landscape or that we're growing up in very well. And there's not really great like kind of institutions, frameworks, etc. for how do you actually navigate this, except perhaps like outside of music. For example, if you look at maybe things like creator economy, you see it with some, I mean, this couple that you mentioned earlier, I think that's a good example, but there's just not much of a, you know, there's no record labels for that type of stuff. There's like, I guess, management agencies and things like that, but then you have to kind of do music, but not in a paradigm of music. So I think there's like a kind of interesting domain problem field, also interesting place to look for opportunities. And then I think the second thing is we don't have like much power over that landscape individually, as in there's a couple of companies that like own most of the data, they own the databases and stuff like that. So I think that's an interesting issue too. So you put all your stuff, all your energy into Instagram or YouTube for that matter. I was just positive about YouTube, but can also be critical. It's easy, or you can kind of randomly get disconnected from your fans by getting like banned because something, I don't know, because you posted a nipple or something like this, or it thinks you posted a nipple. So I think these are problems, and I think kind of solutions come towards like owning your relation with audiences, and if there are like entrepreneurs in the room, figuring out new models that can kind of, that will be like whatever record labels right now. What would those people do, the people that were like kind of pioneering like 1960s, 70s, some of these things, what would they do now? What would they do different? What is needed now? And I'm missing a little bit there. I think, yeah, I think we're at a really kind of interesting point in time, post-pandemic, to go figure those things out.
Actually, I think this kind of links in a way to the capacity building that you were also, the challenge, no, of education and capacity building, and how we share this knowledge. Like, there is, I don't feel there is an avenue to share this knowledge collectively or globally, so to say, the things that this artist from Austin, you were saying, has learned. How does he explain, if he wants to the world, and expands this knowledge? We only have 10 minutes left, and I want to open for questions, and I see there's already one. I don't know if there is a microphone, or?
I think I can.
Okay, shout.
I try to enunciate properly. Just because the question is revolutionizing the music landscape for artists and labels, and something that I believe it's really relevant. And for me personally, as an artist and as a fan of music, Bandcamp has been a beacon of light in of connecting with the fan base. And its recent acquisition by SongTrader and laying off 50% of the staff, especially those that were trying to unionize, I think it's kind of despicable. And what do you think this speaks about the platform? Do you think it will survive? And do you think this type of model has future in the distribution of music? If this is going to be because the way that Bandcamp has been curated and it has been like developed throughout the years has been really artist-centric and music-centric, and it's for the people that really love music. And what do you think this will do to the industry and in general? Thank you.
If I could take a first stab at that, I echo your concerns about Bandcamp. Have used it for years. And to maybe put the spotlight on what Bandcamp teaches us, one of the greatest lessons I've learned about the economics of music came from Bandcamp. In the 4th chapter of my book, Pivot, I got to sit down with the band Radiohead and finally tell the story of how they did In Rainbows back in 2007, which was a voluntary tip jar model. If you're going to steal our album, we'll take it legally, and if you want to pay nothing, pay nothing. If you want to pay something, choose how much you want to pay. In economics, we call this buyer setting the price. Usually, sellers set the price. You set the price for the Arctic Monkeys, not the buyer. What Radiohead said was, let the buyer set the price. So on Bandcamp, one of the most interesting settings they have as a default setting is name your own price, no minimum. So there's guidance, this album should be 15, but you know what? Name your own price, no minimum. And I did this huge piece of work with them, which looked at the mean, median, mode figure that was produced from that default setting of name your own price, no minimum, and it was 40% above asking. So let's say the album was 10, I give you 14. I think that's a hugely telling story about where value goes. We're not selling bottles of shampoo in a supermarket, we're selling art, and the customer's perception of the value of art can often be greater than what the record label or the artist thinks it's worth. So I think that's one lesson that Bandcamp's taught me that I'll treasure for the rest of my life. I think it will evolve. I don't think Bandcamp stays unnumbered. I think it will work out a way out of this. It's gone through 2 large corporate transactions. It's not for me to talk about. I can't talk about those. But I don't think we're going to see the end of Bandcamp. And I think even if it was to go under, something similar would step up into its place. It's a sheer demand for that type of direct-to-fan ability. But the ability to let the buyer set the price is those things that Bandcamp gives you, which is so incredible.
And I think across the board, the direct-to-fan sales have grown and grown and grown because this is what the customers want. They want to sell from the source, from the artist, you know. And we've seen it in many, not only on Bandcamp, but also in the merch D2C shops from our bands. You know, the sales are continuing to grow.
Yeah. Travis Scott, I can only say so much about, but he's direct to fan on his website. $50 for a double vinyl, countless versions as well. So you're seeing people do Bandcamp without Bandcamp. I think that's the interesting thing.
See, please.
How confident are we that the current streaming model where you pay a nominal fee and get everything is going to still exist in 5 to 10 years? And if we see what happened with like Netflix, now we all subscribe to like 5 different services. If that happens for music, how does that change your jobs?
100% confident. And if I'm wrong, I'll buy you a bottle of whiskey. There are 2 things which make music different from Netflix, and they begin with C: copyright and charts. So if you look at the copyright dimension, because there's blanket licensing, you can't extract repertoire out of a digital service like you could do with, let's say, House of Cards on Netflix or Modern Families on Disney+. So the copyright dimension makes our world music structurally, fundamentally different from their world of video. And the second thing is charts. Nobody at Netflix or Disney Plus wakes up on a Monday morning and says, what was my share of streams? Or am I number 1? But we do. So nobody would want to relinquish being on one platform to only be on another and fail to get to number 1. So there's countless other reasons, but to keep it very concise, those 2 are big drivers, which means we all pay the same price for the same plain vanilla ice cream that's available on every other platform. It's a good thing, it's got some drawbacks, but I like the fact that you enter a contract with a streaming platform to access everything, not just something. Great question.
Hello, I'd like to pose a question to all members on the panel. The CD revival, is it happening? If not, is it going to happen? And as music professionals, will you participate?
I didn't understand the
what?
CD
revival.
CD?
The compact disc
I can
revival.
address a little bit, coming also from a label that distributes still some CDs. It's interesting. At some point we were like, okay, shops won't take any CDs. Now my sales department is coming, listen, you should take at least 100 of new Smile album that's coming, because people are starting to buy CDs again. So it is happening, but I don't think it's going to be huge as vinyl revival. On some level, it's good for us to also have another product that we can sell, and the artists have another product. And we were talking about the concept of the album, that's something else. But as Will said, in comparing CDs and vinyls, if we are talking about with vinyls, you're really buying a huge artifact of art, not just a product. That's the big difference. And that's why we are seeing this, somebody mentions the prices of vinyls are going up, but I don't see that sales are going down because of that. So we still have a dedicated audience that wants to buy this. And CDs, yes, I think in some way it's happening, as not on the same level as a cassette, which is more like, you know, I don't know, promo gadget, something like that, because who owns cassette decks? But CDs, yeah, it's gonna be some kind of revival.
It's really interesting because we are seeing, I mean, in general, the CD sales are down, but with us, it's pretty consistent.
It can't go any more down.
Yes.
And I think I've got the legal answer for your question based on remarks from Ninja Tune earlier of what you do when you buy with it, which is it's a lot harder to roll a spliff, a joint on a CD case than it is on a vinyl case. I mean, it's going to have to be small, and that's not desirable. So I think because of that fundamental reason, vinyl will continue to outsell CDs.
Which is very true to old school Ninja Tune fans, of course. The other thing with CD I would like to mention is that I think there's also an idea that when we sign an artist, we'll have a pretty good idea early on of where the bulk of their physical sales are going to be, or whether they're going to be more of a streaming artist. If I was 16 years old in 1990, which I wasn't, I'm far, far, far younger than that. But when I was, but if you were probably buying CDs, right? And you cultivate that collection, you become a CD buyer. So over the last 20 years, we saw CD, was not where it was because streaming and everything else. But it did plateau in a way that if you were buying CDs and you were going to collect CDs and you had one of those sort of 400 case CD rack things you could get from Argos or whatever the equivalent is here, you were probably still buying CDs. So now when we have an artist who specifically speaks to an audience who might be something like 45 to 65 years old maybe, or 45 to 60, we know we're going to sell quite a few CDs because that is a market of people who still purchase CDs. And I think you see that a little bit more with classical music and jazz as well, a fair bit, that people will still purchase CDs. I think, as you found at Domino, that with CDs it's going to plateau again slightly, and I also think this is the case for vinyl, that we will return to quite a nice amount of demand like we had in 2018, 2019, but we won't see the highs of COVID where everyone in fairly wealthy areas would have a lot more money to purchase vinyl. I don't think we're going to see that again, and to be honest, I can't lose any more hair, so I'm glad of that. Let's just have a nice amount of vinyl demand.
I just wanted to add about collecting CDs. I'm one of those who still has many thousands of CDs. I didn't sell them like all the others, although I have the vinyls. And they're built in the walls in my house. And one thing I can say, my wife won't approve CD comeback.
Do we have time for this one last question? See, is that okay? Yeah?
Thanks. I'll try to be quick. Nasco from Stereofox, which is a music blog and a label. I just want to circle back on the topic of the resources, because you said that there's no place where artists can have access to everything that's going on. What we're trying to do is to share knowledge, for example. So I just wanted to mention to all the artists that there is knowledge out there. So there is access for you, that this is a thing that hasn't been available before. I wanted to have a question about what do you think about the more archer-centric systems of, for example, Tidal, the one that they're trying to implement. For example, you can pay your favorite artist more. These are trying to implement this. Bandcamp has always done this. Do you think this is the future, perhaps? Because obviously a lot of the bigger streaming platforms are getting a lot of criticism about not paying artists fairly. So do you think this can be a solution?
So I've got intimate knowledge of this debate over past 5-6 years, a lot of publications in this space as well. The nub, the sort of trade-off that you're dealing with here is what I call fairness and efficiency. So the model that we have just now is really efficient. You pool all the cash together, and if you get 1% of all the streams created in Bulgaria last month, you get 1% of all the cash generated in Bulgaria last month. Anomaly, if there's 2 people in Bulgaria, myself and yourself, and I'm a heavy user and you're a light user, your subscription fee is paying for music you've never listened to because it's subsidizing my consumption. But Is that a problem? Is that an issue? Discuss. The alternative to being user-centric is I'm going to ring-fence your £10 a month to just your music, and you're going to ring-fence my £10 a month to just my music. Now, that sounds fair, but it's also a lot more complex, and complexity comes with a cost. It also doesn't help transparency because royalty rates are going to be all over the place. The pro rata model means every song is worth the same. So 1 million streams, $5,000, royalty rate, even a drummer, no offense to drummers, can work out how to calculate royalties off that. One option I want to give you about this debate, which is very important for this room to consider, is the concept of option value. And to do this, I just want to quickly take you to the gym. Let's say you pay not just £120 a year for music, but £120 a month to use your gym. Plausible. And let's say when you're in that gym, all you use is a treadmill because you're busy, you're running your company, you want to check your phone and follow the news. Should the maker of the treadmill get his entire gym subscription fee? User-centric says yes. Hold on. Would you ever join a gym that only had a treadmill? Perhaps you've got a back injury, and when it sorts itself out, you'll be using the rowing machine without any friction because it's apparatus you can use as part of your gym membership. What got you into the contract was all the apparatus. What you used is just part of the reason why the value was created. What matters most is being measured least, and the option value that streaming services give you, I think, gets lost in that debate. But it's a very tricky one. Last thing about there is, if you're interested in the economics of this, it goes back to Poland, 1939. 3 Polish mathematicians who sat in, for me, ironically, the Scottish cafe. Beautiful story. Let's say my friend from Domino and myself are hungry and we have a cake. How do you split up the cake evenly? And these 3 Polish mathematicians in 1939 came up with this solution. I'm going to give you the knife. Aha, she has the power. She's got the knife to cut up the cake. But me, the right to choose which half, which just forces her to cut the cake evenly. And that's the origins of the mathematics of fair division. Then it gets really complicated, but that simple, nuanced decision, which means that makes sure she cuts the cake evenly, creates a fair division of royalties, a fair allocation of royalties. So yeah, this debate's going to run and run, but hopefully it gives you some backdrop.
I just wanted to add, when we are talking about artist-centric, if we are talking about new model proposed and implemented already by Deezer, it's actually not artist-centric. It is doing 2-tier royalty streaming system. So we have first-class artists and second-class artists. So if we are talking about creating thresholds of 1,000 streams for 500 different users, so it's not an easy threshold for, especially for the artists coming from emerging territories, especially for diverse artists, for niche artists. It's not artists. If we are talking about artist engagement, if you're fan engaged as a fan, if you're engaged more to this, and this should be evaluated by the streaming service, it's something that we will, of course, said it's a good thing. So at this point, to conclude, because this is also a different and topic that we can talk along about, there is no, at this moment that I have heard of, ideal model of dividing this pie. But what we should work, everybody on, that we grow this pie that is going to be divided. So streaming services should send more money to all the rights owners. That's the idea. If that means that that we all should pay for this service more, okay, we should. Definitely.
Yeah. But
I think
you want to
see, and
yeah.
we are over time, so
So stay seated, everyone. No, so I've led product for 2 different streaming services in the past, and one, to me, it's like most important. I love music, so most important thing is I want to see artists get paid. Now, to make a music streaming service successful, you need to get users. You need to get those users into subscriptions, and one of the most important things to track to know that people are going to stick around or that they're going to convert from a trial into a subscription is how much time per day, month, whatever, are they listening to music. So listening time. Meanwhile, you're like licensing these giant catalogs, which is expensive because it comes with kind of minimum fees, and you want to make sure that people always have something to listen to, basically. Meaning you need to have a good search engine, but also, as we've seen in the past, initially kind of streaming services started with playlists, but then eventually, I think Spotify probably, well, maybe Pandora, but you got like recommendation algorithms, so that there's always like something, a new way to go, something more to listen to. And that is super, super important for user retention and for subscription revenues for streaming services, also ad revenues, by the way. That's what like brings the money there. Now, speaking about economic incentives, if you have like a, let's say this artist-centric model, as an artist, what you want is you want to have your fans listen only to your music and not go elsewhere. Whereas if you're a streaming service, you want to spread people over the catalog because that's just way more likely to get them to stick around. Because if they're just there for like one artist, they might as well just get stuff from Bandcamp or like maybe unwrap that vinyl that they bought. I think, you know, without like weighing into like the debate morally and things like that, I think there's an interesting kind of conflict of incentives for artists wanting to maximize kind of the average listening share per user or something like that. Whereas as a music streaming service, you're just trying to get like listening hours up. You're trying to get as many moments with your users as possible, else they're gonna like churn and stop subscribing, or you're not gonna be able to serve as much ads, so you'll have less money basically. And I think that's a really kind of interesting conflict, and that's, yeah, how I would weigh in on that.
I think we'll talk about price, but just very quickly, if I can, add to your comments, there's a bit of a flaw in your logic there, and I want to explain to the person who asked the question why. Very important, which is, you can see in your words, the music is saying, if you actively search for music, if it's music that you want to engage with, the source of streams, that should be worth more. And if it's lean back listening and it's passive and you put your phone in your pocket, that's worth less. I hear that debate. But to press pause for a second, when we think about fair division, you've got the knife, but you don't have the right to choose. So my mentor in all of this work is a man called David Safir, well into the 70s now, a genius brain. And he makes this wonderful remark, which is, for heaven's sake, we haven't even decided who fairness is being defined for. Is it the creator, the platform, or the consumer? If the consumer entered that gym for lean back listening, don't tell the consumer that lean back listening is worth less. Otherwise, they wouldn't have joined your gym or entered that contract in the first place. So fairness is such an abstract concept to wrestle with. It's not, I want more money for indies or I want more money for publishers. It's fundamentally, it's a philosophical question about fairness for whom?
And it's also super complex to do, actually, which is so much more resource.
I'm truly sorry. Okay, Anne.
Yeah. No. I just want.
No one is telling me anything, so I could stay here for.
I think we could go on forever on this topic because it's such an important thing, because we're seeing so much money being generated via streaming services, and it's really, to me personally even, I don't understand how the price, since its inception, has not ever gone up. Yeah. You know, whereas the video streaming services have continuously upped their price.
Yeah, just maybe a footnote to wrap it up with. The origins of the price that you're referring to, $9.99, euro, sterling, and dollar, date back to the 3rd of December 2001, not long after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. That's how far back it goes. And the origins are hilarious because Rhapsody was asking for a license to stream music, and the record label executive, coked out of their brains, said if it cost $9.99 to rent movies from Blockbuster Video, that's what it should cost to rent music. I'm here in Bulgaria for the first time in my life, in October 2023. I still think Spotify's price increase is yet to go through. It is still $9.99 for music. Yeah, but the standalone price, and remember, family of 2.3 people are on a family plan, that's £6.50 per account. It's even cheaper. It's the price of a loaf of bread in London.
Well, but interestingly, they just raised the price for the family subscription. At least I have to pay more. I think it's $17.99. So a price raise is possible. That's all I'm saying, you know. And you won't have much drop off, because I mean, I remember when my kids would just have the free tier, you know, and then, but they are not going to go back to advertisement between songs, you know. People are not going to be dropping off, you know. They're not dropping off.
I'm very sorry. I'm truly sorry for having to stop this conversation. I have 5 more questions I wanted to ask you in my list, but we can continue it offline. We're going to be here for some days still. Thank you very much for all your contributions, and thank you to the audience. Oh, thank you.